So in the second part, I've still got that same file that I was using earlier. I'm just going to hide some of these very quickly. I'm going to reset this one very quickly so I can show you how to do stuff with particle systems. I'm going to turn off the array modifiers for this one, so we just have this singular, very simple looking thing. Now, if you want to create sort of a field of these with a lot of variation in them, a particle system is definitely the way to go. I'm just going to call this one particle shape very quickly, and there we go. Give it a number, and I'm just going to duplicate this. There we go. And if you hit Shift R, Blender will repeat your last action, so you can duplicate it a couple of times. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab the top face of each one, give it sort of a random height. And again, I like doing this fairly quickly. There we go. And why this will become clear in just a second. Next thing I need to do is I'm going to group these together, hit Control G, and I'm just going to call them group.particles. So I'm going to use these objects as little objects for particle system, so I can create really interesting looking things very quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plane. I'm going to move it over here. Just going to scale it up a little bit. And I'm going to subdivide it just a bit as well. So let's say subdivide this like 23 times, something like that. There we go. You get a nice little grid. So I really like Blender's particle system for scattering stuff. It's extremely quick to set up. If you have the emitter set up here, have the start and end at your first frame of animation. So I'm going to set it to 1. Then rather than having any speed, I'm just going to set this to 0. But this is generally not even needed, because if you set the physics to 0, there's no difference from frame to frame, and you can set up static particle systems very quickly for scattering. So you can see we have about 1,000 here. I can set this to be 1 particle per face, and if I turn off random, then once I start turning this down, you'll see it builds up the particle system depending on the numbered order of the polygons within the object itself. Now, it's not really that important, but the important thing to know about this, if you turn off random, you can just look at the amount of verts in here and dial in the same amount of particles, and you will have sort of a 1-to-1 particle on on each individual face of that object. So you could set it to verts as well, but I find setting it to faces is nicer because it's like in the middle of these faces and it looks a little bit better. So the next thing we're going to do is just going to grab the group here, and I have those particles. And the reason I set up those 5 different ones is, as you can see, we now have already differing sizes between the particles themselves. And if we add a random size into this, you get super random looking stuff without having to really lift a finger. I can see there's a little bit of discrepancy between some particles here, so generally I just turn this down until I get a desirable result. Like I said, it's not an exact science. I'm not too worried about having 1 or 2 extra in there somewhere. As long as it looks fine and your end result is okay, then everything should be okay. Now, again, you can mess with this, mess with the size, so you can very dynamically create stuff, and the random sizes here as well to do things like that. So this is a very, very quick particle system. If you were to animate these, for example, so let's say, and you'll see this in the final shot as well. Let's say I'll grab this one, I'll put in a scaling keyframe, put in, scaling keyframe just for all of them. There we go. And what you might have noticed is that the particles have disappeared. This is because the lifetime is actually set to 50 frames. So once you go to 50, it's there again. So you can just hit something like 999. So they're there the whole time. Now the cool thing is the particles will actually take the animation from these individual elements. So I was able to animate like all those little things popping out in the animation very quickly. So if I just scale this down to like 0.1, or actually I'm going to go back. I'll scale this on the z-axis to 0.1, or maybe even to 0. There we go. Scaling, I see 0. Scaling, I see 0. Scaling, just keep going. There's probably an animator somewhere just cringing right now at how slow I'm doing this. Scaling, we can have a look. I forgot to put the timeline back in the beginning, so what I'm going to do is just quickly open the dope sheet and select all these, grab them on the x-axis and just put them on the first frame. There we go. So now as you can see, as those pop up, your particles will scale as well. So you can do have some really interesting effects going. Let's say you grab these two and you'll offset the scale just a little bit. So which one is this? That one, and let's say this one and that one. If you offset them a little bit, then you'll see you'll have different particles, and offset them to an extreme degree so you can actually see what's going on a lot clearer. Now you'll see there's a lot of particles popping up, and then there's a secondary set that's popping up as well. So you can just keep layering the detail on this. And the only thing that I want to change here as well is make sure that I set this to pick random. You started seeing sort of a grid pattern as the particles are being created. Now if I set this to pick random, it'll be even more randomized because it's just picking particles randomly from the group rather than following a certain order that they've been grouped in. So it's another way of doing things. Again, you could go even further. If you go into this one, for example, and just scale it up on the oops, didn't mean to do that. So if I go to the end here, if I go back in and I scale it on anything but the z-axis, so hitting Shift Z to lock it, I have a slightly thicker one. And now you can see there's even thickness being introduced in the different particles. Now these are overlapping, so it's not the very best result. But again, I would add in the wireframe here, which you can still see, it's still visible. And you can create a very nice sort of grid looking pattern. So for this kind of UI stuff, like just keep it as simple as possible and scatter stuff around with particle systems. And again, I encourage you to look at the final file to see all the stuff that I brought in, and you know, you'll probably be surprised at how easy some of it is and you know how simple I kept it. So with this part done, I'd like to move on to the shading part, because honestly for me that's where it gets really interesting. Doing these sort of holographic effects is a lot easier than you might think, especially with the way we've set everything up here. So I'll see you in the next video.